Montana Territory, late spring of 1879, just outside the town of Red Elk. The wind carried the scent of pine and smoke. And when Juliana Jensen ran through the trees with blood on her sleeve and a torn wedding dress clinging to her legs, she did not stop to look back. Her lungs burned. Her bare feet stung from rock and root, but she kept going. Behind her, miles back, was the man she'd been promised to. Cyrus Bellard, wealthy, respected, and cruel in a way that did not show in public but behind closed doors, turned fists into bruises and threats into chains. Juliana had waited until the wedding day, until the last moment. She had stood in front of the altar in her father's lodge, trembling as Cyrus reached for her hand, and then she had bolted, through the back door, into the woods. No horse, no plan, just gone. She did not know how long she had run before the pain in her ankle made her fall. She landed hard, rolled down a shallow slope, and stayed there, cheek against the damp earth, eyes fluttering shut. She had no more strength. And then a voice, low, steady, with a western drawl that bent around her name gently. "Miss, you all right?" Juliana blinked. Sunlight broke through the pine branches above her. A man crouched beside her now, his hat shadowing his face, but she saw a scar along his jaw, a clean-shaven neck, and kind eyes the color of riverbed stone. "Do not touch me," she whispered, trying to back away. Her body refused to move. "I am not here to harm you," he said calmly, hands up. "Name's Silas Nolan. I was riding fence when I saw you tumble down that ridge. You are safe now, I swear it." Juliana closed her eyes. She did not believe in safety, not anymore. Silas had built his life on quiet work and hard mornings. He had been a cattleman for near 10 years, running his own land 6 miles north of Red Elk. He did not ask many questions, but he knew when someone had been hurt. He brought Juliana to his cabin, carried her gently on horseback, wrapped her in his coat. She did not speak on the ride. She kept one hand curled tight against her chest, as if holding something inside. Once home, he set her by the fire and gave her space. She needed it. He could see that. The next morning, she sat on the edge of the bed in one of his old shirts. Her ankle was already swelling. "I will leave," she said quietly, not looking at him. Silas poured coffee into a tin cup. "You can, but you do not have to." She finally looked up. Her eyes were pale green but rimmed red, tired. "Men like you always want something in return." "I do not," he replied. She held his gaze for a long time, waiting for the lie. It did not come. By the third day, she began to speak more. Her voice was soft, careful. She told him her name and that she had no family left. Her mother had passed 2 winters ago. Her father had arranged the match with Cyrus because he owed him money. Silas did not press for more. Instead, he showed her how to collect eggs from the hens and how to balance on her good foot while stirring stew. She cooked with a quiet focus, and he noticed the way she tensed at sudden movements, how she flinched if he entered a room too quickly, so he moved slower. Spoke gently. Never touched her without asking. One evening after supper, she stood on the porch beside him, wrapped in a shawl. The sky was streaked with gold and gray. "Why are you alone?" she asked. "My wife died 5 years back," he answered simply. "Fever took her. We had no children." Juliana nodded. "I am sorry." He looked over, then reached into his pocket and held something out. A small silver hairpin shaped like a bird. "I found this in the woods where you fell," he said. "Yours?" She stared at it. Her hand shook as she took it. "It was my mother's," she whispered. He nodded once and looked back at the horizon. A week passed. Then 2. Juliana began to laugh again, soft, surprised sounds that came when the chickens chased each other or when Silas burned the bread and pretended it was on purpose. She slept better, too. He saw it in the way her shoulders relaxed. Still, she never went near town. That changed one afternoon when he returned from checking the north pasture and found her gone. His heart slammed against his ribs. He saddled his horse fast, rode toward Red Elk, and found her in the alley behind the general store, pressed against a wall. Cyrus Bellard stood in front of her, his hand around her wrist. "You are coming with me," Cyrus hissed. You embarrassed me in front of the whole town. You think you can disappear like some coward?" Silas dismounted and strode forward. "Let her go." Cyrus turned. "This is not your concern, Cowboy." "It is now." Silas stepped between them, forcing Cyrus back. Juliana clung to the wall, wide-eyed, shaking. Cyrus scoffed. "She is mine." "No," Silas said, his voice low. "She is not." Cyrus lunged, but Silas blocked the blow easily, driving his fist into the man's gut and sending him to his knees. "Get out of town," Silas said, his eyes dark. "If I see you near her again, I will put you in the ground." Cyrus staggered away, cursing under his breath. Juliana slid down the wall, knees pulled to her chest. Silas knelt beside her. "You all right?" She nodded slowly, tears falling now. "You came." "Of course I did." She looked at him through wet lashes. "I was scared." "I know." She reached for his hand. He took it. That night she sat on the porch again, wrapped in the same shawl. Silas sat beside her. "I thought he would never stop haunting me," she said, "but when you stepped in, I felt like I could breathe again." Silas looked over. "You do not owe me anything?" "I know," she whispered. "But I want to stay." His breath caught. "You sure?" She nodded. "You make me feel safe." He reached over, brushing her hair back gently. "You make me feel like I have something worth protecting again." She leaned in, and their foreheads touched. "I think I could fall in love with you," she breathed. Silas smiled, his hand cradling her cheek. "You already have," he said. The rains came late that year. By mid-June, the creek behind Silas's barn had begun to dry into braided fingers of water, and the soil cracked beneath their boots. Evenings brought a hush over the land, the kind that settled between two people like a held breath. Juliana stood barefoot outside the barn, her skirt lifted just enough to keep from dragging in the dust. She was tracing her fingers along the gate Silas had mended that afternoon. The boards were new, planed smooth. She liked the smell of cut wood. It reminded her of the days before everything went wrong. Silas stepped out from the shadows inside, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You've been quiet since supper." "I was thinking," she said without turning. "About what it means to stay." He leaned against the post beside her, arms crossed, gaze steady. "You changing your mind?" "No," she said softly, "but I want to pull my weight. I don't want to just be someone you rescued." He didn't answer right away. A horse in the pasture let out a low, restless whinny. "You've been keeping this place going while I'm out riding fence," he said finally. "You see the mending, the pantry, the way that old rooster doesn't try to kill me anymore." A quiet smile touched her face, the first in hours. "I don't need proof you belong here, Juliana. You already do." She turned to him then, her eyes darker in the dimming light. "It's not about proving something to you. It's about proving it to myself." That night, when they lay in their beds, hers in the smaller room off the kitchen where she'd chosen to sleep since the day she arrived, Silas stared at the wooden rafters and thought about the way her voice had trembled, not from fear, but from hope. He could live a lifetime on that sound. The next morning, she woke before dawn and set to work kneading flour into bread, pressing her palms hard into the dough as if shaping something more than a loaf. She had asked Silas the week before to show her how to keep sourdough alive, and now the starter burbled in its crock, smelling faintly of yeast and earth. When he came in from the pasture, dust clinging to his jeans, he found her elbow deep in flour. She didn't look up. "Think it's ready to rise?" He stepped close, ran his thumb over the edge of the dough. "Looks good to me." She wiped her hands on her apron and nodded once. "I was thinking about the north field." "What about it?" "There's space for a garden." "You ever grown squash?" He laughed, low and surprised. "Never had the patience." "I do," she said. "I want to plant something that'll still be here in the fall." He watched her a long moment, then reached for the kettle. "I'll help you fence it." It became their rhythm. Mornings with bread and coffee, afternoons fencing the patch of earth she'd claimed, evenings tending soil with calloused hands. Juliana began to hum when she worked, quiet at first, then stronger. Old melodies, half-remembered from childhood with no words attached. One afternoon, while she was pressing seeds into soft furrows, Silas set a box beside her. "What's that?" "Tomato starts." Got them from the widow McCree down near Elk River. Juliana looked up, surprised. You went all that way. She said they do well in dry summers if you keep the roots shaded. Juliana touched the leaves gently. Thank you. Silas knelt beside her, brushing dirt from the cuff of his shirt sleeve. You ever think about what comes after the garden's grown? She tilted her head. What do you mean, I mean? He paused, looking away. You ever think about staying for good, not just through summer? The wind picked up, stirring the dust around them. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the planter. I do think about it, she said. But I don't know how to be someone's wife again. Silas nodded. I'm not asking you to be something you ain't. She reached for his hand, dirt under her nails, skin warm. But I want to learn what it means to be yours. They sat like that, knees touching, the tomato box between them as the sun dipped lower. That night, she didn't return to the small room off the kitchen. Instead, she followed him down the narrow hall without saying a word, and when he opened the door to his room, she stepped inside first. The air was thick with heat and silence, but neither of them reached for more than the other's hand. He lit a lamp and set it low. She turned to him, her hair loose from the day's work, freckled shoulders bare beneath the linen of her nightdress. I don't want to be afraid anymore. You don't have to be, he said. Their fingers found one another again. No rush, no hunger. Just the quiet knowledge that love had taken root. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall on the roof. The hills turned gold by midsummer, dry light spilling over the ridge each morning like warm silk. Juliana had taken to waking before Silas now, stepping out to the edge of the porch with a cup of brew he'd taught her to make from roasted chicory and crushed bark. He caught her there one morning, hair still damp from washing, dress wrinkled from sleep. You always rise this early? He asked, his voice low from sleep. Not before, she said, watching a hawk circle high above the pasture, but I don't want to miss anything anymore. He leaned on the post beside her. You ever think about what you'd be doing if you'd gone through with it? That day, I mean. She didn't answer right away. The hawk dipped once, then glided west. I think I'd be gone by now, not in a way you could see. Silas nodded once, quiet. She glanced at his bare feet, dusty from the boards. You ever think about leaving this place? I tried once, he said. The year after Anna passed. Rode as far as Bismarck, thought maybe the distance would loosen something in me. Did it? No, I came back and planted fence post until my hands bled. That helped more. She looked over at him then, truly looked. You don't talk about her much. She was gentle, he said, and quiet, liked reading to the dogs when it rained. Juliana's brow softened. You loved her. I did. She looked down at the cup in her hands. Does it make you feel like you're betraying her? Silas shook his head. No. Loving you doesn't take anything from what I had with her. It's different. You and me, it's been earned inch by inch. She touched his wrist, fingers light. That's how I feel. Later that week, Silas came in from the barn with a slip of paper folded in his pocket. He set it on the table beside her plate and sat without speaking. What is it? She asked. Land deed. The quarter-acre behind the barn. I had the papers adjusted in town. She unfolded it, hands steady. I want you to have it. Not because I think you'll leave, but so you know you're free to stay. Her throat worked as she swallowed. You sure? I don't want you here because you owe me something. I want you here because you chose it. She folded the paper again, slowly, and set it in her lap. I didn't know what a home felt like until this. But I want to build something that's mine, too, maybe a shed for drying herbs, a place I can work with my hands. Then we'll build it, he said. That night, they sat on the floor near the hearth, a tin of linseed oil between them as they rubbed it into the porch chairs he'd brought in for repairs. Juliana dipped the rag again and worked it into the grain, the scent sharp and clean. My mother used to keep a journal, she said. She'd write down things she overheard at the market, snippets of conversation, names of plants she didn't recognize. What happened to it? I buried it near her grave, thought maybe the pages would keep her company. Silas considered that. You ever think of writing your own? I wouldn't know what to say. I bet you'd find the words. She looked at him then, eyes steady. Maybe I already have, she said. In August, the first calf came early. Juliana found it by the stream bed, its mother still panting, the calf slick and trembling. She ran back for Silas, breathless, dress soaked at the hem. He followed her without question, rope slung over his shoulder, boots unlaced. When they reached the shallow bend, he knelt beside the calf and checked its limbs. "She's strong," he said. "Give her time." Juliana crouched beside him, hand on the calf's flank. She should have a name. Silas glanced at her. "You pick it," she thought a moment. "Mara," he smiled. "Mara it is." As the sun burned low that evening, they sat on the slope above the stream, watching the calf wobble forward on new legs. Juliana leaned into him, her head against his shoulder. "You ever want more?" she asked. He turned to her. "More? Children? A family?" Silas exhaled slowly. "I used to think that door closed with Anna. But now..." Juliana waited. "I think if it opened again, I wouldn't be afraid to walk through." She nodded, hand resting over his heart. "I think I'd like to raise something that grows slow and steady, a child, a garden. A life. You and me," he said, "we're already building it." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes full and sure. Autumn would bring frost and the first real test of the new garden. But for now, the ground was still warm, the calf was standing, and the man beside her had made a place in his life where she had not only survived but begun again. The first frost came in early October, silvering the tops of the fence rails and curling the edges of the squash leaves. Juliana pulled her shawl tighter as she stepped out into the crisp air, her boots crunching over cold dirt. The garden was nearly finished for the season. What hadn't ripened before the cold would not ripen at all. Still, she knelt to gather the last of the beans, her breath visible in the morning air. Silas was already in the barn, oiling the harnesses. She found him there, sleeves pushed up, a streak of grease along his forearm. "There's a wagon coming up the road," she said, brushing her hands on her skirt. "From the south." He looked up sharply. "You recognize it?" "No," she said, "but whoever's driving it keeps stopping like they're unsure." He wiped his hands on a cloth and followed her out to the porch. The wagon was slow, drawn by a sway-backed mule. A boy, no older than 15, sat hunched on the bench, reins slack in his hands. When he saw them, he raised his arm in a wide wave and steered toward the gate. Silas stepped forward, boots crunching dry gravel. "You looking for something?" The boy drew to a stop, cheeks flushed from the chill. "You Mr. Nolan?" "I am." The boy reached into the seat beside him and held out a folded envelope. "Was told to bring this to you by a woman passing through Miles City. Paid me with a silver brooch and a sack of cornmeal." Silas took the envelope, frowning. The handwriting was unfamiliar, tight, deliberate. He opened it and read in silence. Juliana watched his expression change, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. He folded the paper and looked at the boy. "You heading back today?" The boy shrugged. "Soon as I get some water and rest the mule." "There's a pump near the shed," Juliana said. "Take what you need." Once the boy had gone, she turned to Silas. "What is it?" He hesitated. "It's from a woman named Clara Hastings. Says she was a friend of Anna's. She's passing through Red Elk in a week's time and wants to talk in person." Juliana folded her arms against the cold. "You ever hear of her before?" "No," he said, "but she knew things about Anna she couldn't have guessed. Said she found a box of Anna's things after her father passed. Wants to give it to me." Juliana studied him. "You want me to go with you?" "I'd like that," he said, "if you're willing." A week later, they rode into Red Elk together. Juliana wore her wool coat, the one she'd taken in at the shoulders, and Silas had shaved that morning, his jaw clean and sharp against the collar of his shirt. The town hadn't changed much, same dusty street, same hitching posts worn smooth by years of rains and weather, but walking through it beside him felt different now. They met the woman at the back of the mercantile. Clara Hastings was tall, with hair streaked gray and a narrow mouth that didn't smile much. She carried a small wooden box tied shut with twine. "I don't mean to stir ghosts," she said, setting it down, "but Anna asked me to give this to you if anything ever happened. I didn't know where you were until I passed through Miles City and heard your name mentioned." Silas untied the twine slowly, lifting the lid. Inside was a stack of letters, a pressed daisy, and a child's drawing done in faded pencil. He didn't speak. Clara folded her gloved hands. She wanted you to have them, said you'd know when the time was right. Juliana touched his arm, light and steady. On the ride back, he held the box on his lap, staring out at the hills. Only when they reached the edge of their land did he speak. She wrote about wanting to build a school on the far ridge, he said. Said the children out here deserved better than what they had. Juliana nodded. Do you want to try and make it happen? I think I do, he said. For her. And for what comes next. That night they sat on the porch again, a blanket over both their knees. The air was sharp, stars bright above the black treetops. I didn't expect to ever feel anything this settled, Juliana said. Not after what I ran from. You didn't just run, Silas said. You survived, there's a difference. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I don't think I'd have lasted through the winter without you. You would have, he said, but I'm glad you didn't have to. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a thin gold ring dull with age, my mother's. I've carried it since the day I left. I think she'd want me to use it again. He looked down at her hand, then at her. You asking? I'm offering, she said. He took the ring and turned it in his fingers, then slid it onto her hand. We'll do it right, he said. Just us, no church full of folks, no one to force anything. That's all I want, she said. He kissed her then, slow and sure, the kind of kiss that didn't need promises because it had already kept them. In the quiet that followed, the wind rustled through the dried corn stalks behind the shed, and somewhere in the dark, a calf lowed softly. They would marry before the first snow. Not because they needed to prove something, but because they had already built it. A life woven from silence and work, from shared ground and slow trust. A life that had begun in pain and grown into peace. The air held a stillness that only came before snow. The clouds had thickened over the last days, low and undisturbed, like wool stretched across the sky. In the far distance, a wolf called once, its voice thin with hunger, swallowed quickly by the hush of oncoming winter. Inside the cabin, Juliana stood at the table, tracing the edge of a folded linen handkerchief with her thumb. The fabric was worn but clean, its corners embroidered with faded blue thread. She had found it while sorting through the last of the crate Clara had brought. Beneath it had been a small, handwritten note, simple, unsigned, but unmistakably Anna's. Juliana had not shown it to Silas yet. It hadn't felt like time. She heard the door open behind her, the gentle scuff of boots against the threshold. Silas stepped in, carrying a stack of cut cedar logs over one shoulder. His coat was dusted with bark, and the smell of fresh sap followed him in. You're quiet, he said, setting the wood down near the hearth. Juliana turned, hand still holding the handkerchief. I found something of hers. It wasn't meant for me, but I read it. I think she wanted you to have it. He took it without a word, unfolding the note carefully. His brow furrowed as he read, but his hands didn't tremble. After a moment, he folded it again and looked up. She wrote this after her second miscarriage. I didn't know she'd kept anything from that time. I think she wanted to leave it behind, Juliana said. But not forget it, Silas nodded slowly. That's how it is with pain. You carry it, but you don't always need to hold it in your hands. Juliana stepped closer. I'd understand if it's hard to build something new with all that still in the room. I think it's the opposite, he said. It's made me know what matters. She reached up and touched his cheek, rough with cold. Then let's build something that lasts. The wedding happened on a Sunday, 1 week before the first snow fell. They stood under the bare cottonwoods behind the cabin, just the two of them and the preacher from Red Elk, who had driven up with his wife and brought a basket of apples from their cellar. Juliana wore a dress she'd sewn from unbleached muslin, the sleeves long and narrow, the waist gathered with a ribbon dyed from walnut husks. Her hair had been braided by the preacher's wife, who had brought a silver hatpin in the shape of a feather and tucked it in just above Juliana's ear. Silas wore his best wool coat, brushed clean, and his boots had been polished with bare fat until they shone. He had trimmed his hair but left the scar along his jaw uncovered, as he always did. It was part of him, and Juliana had once told him it reminded her of strength that didn't boast. When the vows were spoken, they held each other's gaze without wavering. The preacher's wife wept quietly, and the preacher himself smiled so broadly the corners of his eyes crinkled like paper. Afterward, they shared a simple meal: roast chicken, bread with dried cranberries, and a tart made from the last of the apples. The preacher and his wife left before dusk, promising to return in spring with seedlings from their orchard. That night, Juliana and Silas sat by the fire, the cabin warm from the day's cooking. She leaned her head against his shoulder and he reached for her hand beneath the quilt. "You ever think we'd get here?" she asked. "No," he admitted. "But I can't imagine being anywhere else now," she smiled, soft and full. "I think we were meant to find each other in the middle of it all. I reckon we were." Outside, snow began to fall, slow and silent, blanketing the earth in the first hush of winter. Months passed. The schoolhouse took shape by early spring, its frame set on the ridge where the wind was gentler and the light lasted longer. Silas worked the beams with methodical care, and Juliana painted the trim a soft green, using brushes she had traded for with dried herbs and preserves. The townsfolk began sending their children on horseback, wrapped in quilts and laughter. Juliana taught them how to read, how to grow roots in a place with hard winters and long summers. She kept a bell on the porch that rang deep and clear each morning. Mara, the calf they'd nursed through its first shivering days, had grown tall and broad-shouldered, and now grazed near the edge of the garden fence. She had a calf of her own by midsummer. Juliana kept the ring on her finger when she worked, never mind the dirt or the wear. It was hers now, not as a memory of escape, but a marker of what she had chosen fully, freely. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the ridge, Silas stood beside her near the garden rows. She was barefoot, her hem wet from watering and her belly round beneath her apron. "Feel that?" she asked, taking his hand and placing it over the curve of her stomach. "He's kicking again." Silas didn't speak. He just held his hand there, eyes closed, steady. "You think he'll have your eyes?" she asked. "No," he said, "he'll have yours." "So he can see the world the way you do," she laughed, the sound low and certain. "Then he'll be all right." They stayed like that as the light faded, the sky streaked with rose and ash, the scent of turned earth and lilac floating around them. Together, they had reclaimed something the world had once tried to take: dignity, peace, and the right to a life chosen, not given. And as the years unfolded, slow and rich, they never once let go of what they had built, rooted deep in borrowed land, under hard skies, with hands that knew how to hold and never harm.